I often think back to those early days when Anna and I were the epitome of happiness. It was like we were living in a beautifully scripted romantic comedy, where every moment was filled with laughter and joy. We met in college, both fresh-eyed and full of dreams, and it felt like fate had orchestrated our paths to cross. From the start, there was an undeniable chemistry between us. Our first date was at a cozy little cafe downtown, where we spent hours discussing everything from our favorite books to our ambitions in life. I can still picture the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dream of becoming a graphic designer. She had this infectious enthusiasm that made you want to believe in the beauty of the world. As time went on, we became inseparable. Weekends were reserved for spontaneous adventures. We would drive out to the countryside, blasting our favorite playlists windows down, feeling the wind whip through our hair. There was that one time we got lost on a back road, and instead of panicking, we turned it into a picnic under a sprawling oak tree. We laid out a blanket, shared sandwiches, and laughed until our sides hurt. Those moments were pure bliss, and I did not doubt that we were destined for something great together. We both shared a love for the arts, often spending our evenings exploring local galleries or attending live music shows. Anna had a knack for finding hidden gems, small art exhibits or up-and-coming bands that would leave us both buzzing with excitement. It was during one of those evenings that I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Watching her immerse herself in the music, her face glowing in the dim light, I felt a surge of love so profound it took my breath away. With time, our lives began to intertwine even further. We moved in together into a quaint apartment in the heart of the city. It was modest, but it felt like a sanctuary. We painted the walls in soft pastel colors, filled the shelves with books we both loved, and adorned the space with little mementos from our adventures. Every corner of that apartment felt like a reflection of our journey together. We often talked about our future, making plans and dreams that felt almost tangible. I could see us traveling the world, exploring new cultures and cuisines, and perhaps even starting a family one day. We made lists of places we wanted to visit, from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the serene beaches of Bali. The world felt wide open before us, and I was convinced that together, we could conquer anything. Every evening, we'd curl up on the couch with a bottle of wine, discussing our days and sharing our thoughts. I cherished those moments, the intimacy of just being together, wrapped in our little bubble of love. I would often look into Anna's eyes and feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She was not just my partner, she was my best friend. Yet, as I reflect on those days, I can't help but feel a twinge of nostalgia, knowing that the happiness we shared would soon be overshadowed by betrayal. But at that moment, everything felt perfect, and I believed we were unstoppable. Little did I know, the life I thought we were building together was about to unravel in ways I could never have imagined. It all began on a warm Saturday evening, one of those nights when the city felt alive with energy. Our friends had organized a party at a trendy rooftop bar, a popular spot that overlooked the skyline. The air was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint sound of music wafting through the night. Anna and I arrived together, hand in hand, excited to unwind and enjoy the company of our friends. As the night progressed, I lost myself in conversation with some familiar faces. The atmosphere was vibrant, with people mingling and sharing stories. I spotted Anna across the room, animatedly chatting with a group of new acquaintances. That was when I first noticed him, Michael. He stood a little taller than most, with a confident demeanor that commanded attention. Michael was introduced to me as an attorney from a prestigious firm. And I could tell right away that he exuded charm. There was something magnetic about him, his laughter was contagious, and his sharp wit kept everyone around him engaged. As I watched him interact with Anna, I couldn't help but notice the way he leaned in closer to her, as if he were sharing some kind of inside joke. At first, I shrugged it off. After all, I trusted Anna completely. She was warm and friendly with everyone, and I knew that her engaging personality drew people in. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more between them. They seemed to share an effortless connection, one that felt different from the friendly banter I observed in the past. After a few hours, I finally approached Anna, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. She turned to me with that familiar smile that always made my heart race. "Hey there, I was just talking to Michael. He's really interesting," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I nodded, trying to mask my discomfort. "Yeah, I noticed. He seems like a fun guy." We chatted for a few moments before she was pulled back into a conversation with Michael and his group. I tried to engage with the other guests, but my mind kept drifting back to them. As weeks went by, I noticed that Anna was spending more and more time with Michael. They started hanging out outside of group events. Lunches turned into long afternoons, and casual meetups evolved into evenings spent together. She would come home with stories about their conversations, how they bonded over mutual interests, and how he encouraged her artistic pursuits. I wanted to be supportive, believing that friendships could blossom in unexpected ways. But something gnawed at me, a feeling deep in my gut that told me I should pay attention. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. Anna was still the loving partner I knew, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a newfound excitement that was difficult to ignore. One evening, after she returned home late from another outing with Michael, I found myself questioning her. "You've been spending a lot of time with him lately," I said, attempting to keep my tone casual. "Is everything okay?" She laughed lightly, brushing it off. "Oh, come on, James. He's just a friend. We talk about work and art, nothing more." Her reassurance should have calmed me, but instead, it only deepened my unease. As the weeks turned into months, it became increasingly clear that Michael was not just another friend. I watched as Anna's phone buzzed with messages, her face lighting up whenever she received one from him. Late nights turned into early mornings, and I started to feel like a ghost in my own home. The more I observed, the more I felt an invisible wall building between us. Anna still tried to include me in her conversations about Michael, but I could sense the energy had changed. The way she talked about him, how he inspired her, how he seemed to understand her in ways I didn't, made my stomach twist. I was losing her, and I couldn't figure out how to bridge the growing gap. That night marked the beginning of a slow descent into a reality I couldn't yet fathom. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal as I realized that the laughter and warmth we once shared were being overshadowed by something I couldn't control. I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest, knowing that the perfect world we had built together was beginning to crumble, inch by inch. The arrival of Michael had shifted everything, and I was left feeling more alone than ever, wondering what was next in this precarious dance of love and betrayal. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice a shift in Anna. The vibrant laughter that once echoed through our apartment slowly started to fade, replaced by a subtle tension that hung in the air. She became more secretive, often pulling away from me at unexpected moments. I would catch her glancing at her phone with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, hastily hiding it as I entered the room. It was the little things that started to add up. Anna began to leave for work earlier and return home much later, claiming she was busy with deadlines or meetings. I tried to be understanding, reminding myself that her career as a graphic designer demanded a lot of her time, but something felt off. The late nights felt like they were stretching into a routine, and my heart began to race every time she walked through the door. One evening, she texted me to say she would be late again. I settled onto the couch, flipping through TV channels, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. It was a creeping sense of dread that gnawed at me, manifesting as a tight knot in my stomach. I tried to dismiss it. After all, Anna was still my partner, my best friend. Yet, the more time passed, the more isolated I felt. That weekend, I found myself alone in the apartment, the silence amplifying my anxiety. I decided to clean up a bit, hoping to distract myself. As I was organizing the clutter on her desk, my eye caught a glimpse of her phone lying there, face up. The screen lit up with a notification, and before I could stop myself, I instinctively reached for it. In a split second, curiosity morphed into a wave of dread. I unlocked her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but I felt compelled to know the truth. I navigated to her messages, and that's when I saw it, the thread with Michael. My hands shook as I scrolled through their conversations, each message like a dagger to my heart. What I found was a mixture of flirty banter and intimate exchanges that left me breathless. They talked about secret meetings and shared jokes that only they seemed to understand. But the most gut-wrenching part was when I stumbled upon messages that hinted at romantic encounters, plans that were more than just friendly get-togethers. My breath caught in my throat as the reality of what I was reading settled in. I felt as though the ground beneath me had crumbled away, leaving me suspended in disbelief. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating and heavy. I had known. Deep down, that something was wrong, but seeing it laid out in front of me shattered any remaining illusions. I dropped the phone back onto the desk, my heart racing and my palms clammy. I felt utterly lost, trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, rage, heartbreak, confusion. I couldn't fathom how Anna, the woman I loved more than anything, could betray me like this. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but fear gripped me. What would I say? How could I even begin to process this? Instead, I sat down on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the wall. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, and I fought them back, refusing to let them fall. The perfect life we had built together felt like a distant memory, replaced by a haunting reality that felt all too real. The seconds turned into minutes, and in that silence, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers, while another part of me wanted to retreat. To let her live in her deceit. But one thing was clear, everything had changed, and I could no longer pretend that my world was anything but shattered. In the days that followed my discovery, I found myself consumed by a dark curiosity. Confronting Anna felt impossible. The very thought of facing her and hearing the truth filled me with dread. Instead, I became a silent observer, a ghost in the shadows, determined to piece together the reality of her betrayal without tipping my hand. Each morning, I would wake up and put on a facade of normalcy. I made breakfast, just as I always did, and greeted Anna with a smile, masking the turmoil churning inside me. She remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As she hurried out the door, often rushing to meet Michael, I felt an ache in my chest that grew sharper with each passing day. My first outing was to the park across the street from our apartment. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and I took a seat on a bench, pretending to read a book while keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of her. I felt like a spy in my own life, and the weight of my deception weighed heavily on my conscience. But my need to understand outweighed my guilt. Hours passed, and just as I was about to lose hope, I spotted Anna. She walked into the park, her laughter echoing as she approached a familiar figure, Michael. They stood close together, their body language radiating intimacy that made my heart sink. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to focus on the scene unfolding before me. They wandered along the winding paths, stopping occasionally to take in the scenery, but all I could see was the way she leaned into him, the way they shared quiet moments that should have been ours. I quickly pulled out my notebook, jotting down every detail, what they wore, how they interacted, the subtle touches that spoke volumes. I was determined to document everything, a silent witness to their secret life. As the days turned into weeks, I developed a routine. I would linger in the park, often arriving before Anna, and waiting for hours until I spotted them. Some days they would meet for coffee, other days they would stroll through the park hand in hand. Each encounter chipped away at my sanity, and I felt like a voyeur peering into a world that no longer belonged to me. I became adept at blending in, observing other park-goers while keeping my focus on Anna and Michael. I watched their laughter ripple through the air, felt a pang of jealousy as they shared ice cream cones, and cringed when I saw her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, an action I used to cherish. One afternoon, as I sat hidden behind a cluster of trees, I overheard snippets of their conversation. It was a warm day, and they were sitting on a bench, seemingly lost in their world. I strained to hear, my heart racing with every word. "I just feel so alive when I'm with you," Anna said, her voice light and carefree. Michael replied, "I love how we can be ourselves together. It's like we've known each other forever." Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I wanted to confront them, to burst out of my hiding place and demand answers, but I felt paralyzed. Instead, I continued to document their encounters, crafting a twisted narrative of their betrayal that fueled my anger and despair. But lurking in the shadows took a toll on me. I started to lose track of time, missing work commitments and neglecting my well-being. My friends began to notice my absence, but I brushed off their concerns, too absorbed in my secret mission. The world outside faded away as I became consumed by this need to uncover the truth, even if it meant losing myself in the process. The park became my second home, a place where I could observe but not participate. The thrill of watching them was intoxicating and suffocating all at once. I felt like a puppet master, pulling strings in a game I never wanted to play. The longer I watched, the more I realized how deeply I had buried my pain. My heart ached. but I clung to the hope of finding closure. As I scribbled down notes and kept my distance, I became increasingly aware of a ticking clock, reminding me that this couldn't go on forever. But with each encounter, I was left with more questions than answers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was inching closer to a breaking point. I needed to confront Anna, but the fear of what that might mean kept me rooted in my role as the watchful eye, lurking in the shadows of a life that was slipping away. It was another gray afternoon in the park, the kind of day where the clouds hung low, threatening rain. I had taken my usual spot on a bench, my notebook opened on my lap as I jotted down the latest details of Anna's rendezvous with Michael. My heart felt heavy, the burden of my secret life weighing on my shoulders. I was so consumed by my thoughts that I barely noticed the figure approaching until he sat down beside me. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low and casual. I looked up, startled to find a man in his late 30s, with disheveled hair and a tired expression. He had a friendly demeanor, but his eyes held a depth of sadness that mirrored my own. I nodded, and he settled in, casting a glance at my notebook. "What's got you so engrossed?" he asked, curiosity evident in his tone. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. There was something about him that felt safe, and I found myself wanting to share my burden. "Just taking notes," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's a long story." He nodded as if he understood more than I was saying. "I get that. I'm Liam," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "James," I replied, shaking his hand. There was an immediate connection, a shared understanding of pain that hung in the air between us. "What brings you to the park today?" he asked, leaning back on the bench and looking out at the path ahead. "Just observing," I said, trying to maintain a casual tone. I didn't want to reveal too much too soon, but I felt an odd sense of comfort in his presence. "Observing, huh? Sounds intriguing." He chuckled lightly, but there was an edge to his laughter as if he knew all too well what it meant to watch from the sidelines. After a moment of silence, I decided to take the plunge. "My wife, she's been spending a lot of time with someone else. I think she's cheating on me." The words felt heavy as they left my lips, and I took a deep breath, preparing for whatever reaction might come next. Liam turned to me, his expression shifting from casual curiosity to one of empathy. "I know that feeling all too well," he said, his voice steady but soft. "My wife is doing the same. It's like living in a nightmare that never ends." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared experiences hanging between us. I could see the pain etched on his face, and it made me feel less alone. "How long have you known?" I finally asked. "About 3 months," he replied, running a hand through his hair. I found out when I stumbled upon a message on her phone. It was like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what to do, just like you. His words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of camaraderie form in that moment. It's like I'm living in a fog. I want to confront her, but part of me is terrified of what I'll find, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam nodded, a look of understanding in his eyes. "You're not alone, man. It's hard to process when the person you love becomes a stranger." I spent weeks just trying to gather evidence, watching her, feeling like a detective in my own life. "It can consume you." "Exactly," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I've been watching my wife with him, trying to understand what's happening. It's agonizing." "Have you talked to anyone about it?" Liam asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes it helps to share what you're feeling." I shook my head. "Not really. I've kept it all inside. I guess I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems. Trust me, bottling it up only makes it worse," he said, his tone firm yet gentle. "You need to let it out, find someone you can trust to share this with. It helps to talk to someone who understands." We talked for hours, sharing our stories and the emotional turmoil we were both experiencing. Liam shared details about his wife, how they had once been happy, and the memories that haunted him now. It felt good to connect with someone who truly understood the pain of betrayal. We laughed at the absurdity of our situations and lamented over the lost trust. Our camaraderie solidifying with every shared moment. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in weeks. In Liam, I had found an unexpected friend, someone who had been through the fire and emerged with a semblance of understanding. We exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. As I left the park that day, I felt lighter, knowing that I wasn't alone in this battle. With Liam by my side, Perhaps I could find the strength to confront Anna and navigate the uncertainty ahead. I still didn't know what the future held, but I realized that sharing my pain could help me start to reclaim my life. The following weeks turned into a strange new rhythm for Liam and me. After our first meeting in the park, we began to text regularly, sharing our thoughts, frustrations, and the details of our increasingly complicated lives. The bond we forged grew stronger, born from our shared experiences of heartbreak and betrayal. One evening, we decided to meet at a small cafe, a cozy spot tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The ambiance was warm and inviting, with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling in the air. As we sat across from each other, I couldn't help but notice the exhaustion etched on Liam's face. It mirrored my own, a reflection of sleepless nights and endless worries. "I just don't know how to face her anymore," Liam said, stirring his coffee absently. "It's like I'm constantly walking on eggshells. I want to confront her, but I don't want to make things worse." I nodded in agreement, my mind racing with similar thoughts. I feel the same way about Anna. It's agonizing to know she's with someone else while I'm left here, feeling powerless. There was a moment of silence between us, both of us grappling with our emotions. Then, something shifted in the atmosphere, and Liam's expression changed as if a light bulb had gone off in his head. What if we took control?" he proposed, his voice low but filled with a newfound intensity. "What if we confronted them together? We could set up a meeting and catch them in the act." I raised my eyebrows, surprised by his suggestion. "You mean, like a setup?" "Exactly," he said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We could expose their betrayal in front of each other. Show them how it feels to be humiliated. They deserve that, don't you think?" The idea hung in the air between us, electrifying and terrifying all at once. My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. Part of me was horrified at the thought of orchestrating something so vindictive. But another part of me felt a flicker of excitement, a chance to regain some control over the chaos that had consumed my life. "I don't know, Liam. What if it blows up in our faces?" I hesitated, envisioning the fallout of such a confrontation. "Look, we're already hurting. They've taken so much from us, and we've been left to suffer in silence. This isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming our dignity," he urged. "We can do this together. It'll be a cathartic release." His words struck a chord within me. I remembered the countless hours I had spent lurking in the shadows, my heart heavy with betrayal. The thought of finally confronting Anna and Michael filled me with a mix of dread and anticipation. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, curiosity piquing despite my reservations. Liam leaned back, a plan forming in his mind. "We'll pick a place where they often meet, maybe that Italian restaurant downtown. We'll set a date, and then we'll show up together. They won't expect it, and we can reveal everything right there." I felt my pulse quicken as the vision unfolded before me. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. "And what if they deny it?" I asked, anxiety creeping in. Liam shrugged. "We'll have the evidence. You've been taking notes, right? You can share what you've seen, and I can do the same. They won't be able to wiggle out of it." I weighed his words, the tension building in the air. The thought of finally exposing Anna's betrayal filled me with a sense of purpose, a way to regain some semblance of control over my shattered life. But at the same time, a small voice in the back of my mind warned me of the potential consequences. "Okay," I finally said, my voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "Let's do it. Let's set it up." Over the next few days, we meticulously planned the details. We agreed on a date, a Saturday evening when we knew they would be together, and decided to meet just outside the restaurant to coordinate our entrance. The closer we got to the day, the more my stomach twisted with anxiety. On the day of the confrontation, I paced my apartment, rehearsing what I would say. I felt a mix of determination and fear of how Anna would react, fear of the chaos that would follow. But beneath it all was a simmering anger that urged me forward, propelling me to see this plan through. As I stood outside the restaurant, waiting for Liam to arrive, I felt the weight of my decision settle heavily on my shoulders. This was it. I was about to confront the woman I loved and the man who had taken her from me. I glanced at my watch, my heart racing as Liam finally appeared. He looked just as nervous as I felt, but there was a fire in his eyes that mirrored my resolve. Together, we stepped into the unknown, ready to face the reality we had been avoiding for far too long. The time for hiding was over, it was time for the truth to be unveiled. The evening air was thick with anticipation as I stood outside the Italian restaurant, my heart racing like a drum in my chest. The restaurant was bustling with patrons, laughter, and the clinking of silverware, but I felt detached from it all. It was as if I was standing on the edge of a precipice, peering into an abyss that I was about to leap into. Liam arrived, his expression mirroring my mix of nervousness and resolve. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady but with an underlying tremor. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, trying to muster the confidence I desperately needed. We stepped inside, the warm glow of the restaurant lighting casting a cozy atmosphere, starkly contrasting the turmoil brewing inside me. I spotted a table in the corner, just out of sight but close enough to make our presence known. We settled into our seats, the tension palpable between us as we awaited Anna and Michael's arrival. "Remember, we're here to expose the truth," Liam said, trying to keep the mood light. "This is our moment." I forced a smile but could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on my shoulders. Time seemed to stretch, each minute feeling like an eternity as we waited. The restaurant bustled around us, but all I could focus on was the door, willing to swing open and reveal the faces of the people who had turned our lives upside down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw them. Anna walked in first, her smile radiant, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. Michael followed closely, a confident swagger in his step. They were the picture of happiness. And for a moment, my heart ached at the sight of my wife, the woman I loved, seemingly carefree and oblivious. "Here we go," Liam muttered, his grip tightening around his glass of water. As they approached the hostess stand, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. I exchanged a determined glance with Liam, and we both stood up simultaneously. "Anna," I called out, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion, and then to apprehension as her gaze landed on me. Michael's eyes widened, and for a brief second, the facade of confidence cracked. "What are you doing here, James?" Anna asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I think it's time we talked," I said, forcing my words through clenched teeth. "All of us." The tension in the air became almost suffocating as I gestured toward the empty chairs at our table. "We have a lot to discuss," I added, trying to keep my tone steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions raging within me. Anna looked at Michael, who was momentarily taken aback. "James, this isn't the place for." "It's exactly the place for this," I interrupted, the heat of anger flaring in my chest. "You both think you can carry on without a care in the world? Let's talk." Reluctantly, they approached the table, and the four of us sat down, the atmosphere thick with tension. I could feel my heart pounding as I locked eyes with Anna. Her expression was a mixture of disbelief and guilt, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in her eyes. "James, I didn't think you would find out," Anna began, but I cut her off. "Save it," I snapped, my voice sharper than intended. "I know everything." Michael's jaw tightened, and he shifted in his seat, but I could see that he was trying to maintain his composure. "Look, James, let's not do this here. We can talk about this privately." "No, we're doing it now," I insisted, feeling a surge of determination. "You both deserve to be exposed for what you've done." Liam, sitting beside me, leaned in, his voice steady. "We know about the affair, and we want you both to acknowledge it. You can't keep pretending everything is fine." Anna's eyes welled with tears as the reality of the situation hit her. She looked at Michael, her voice trembling. "I never meant for it to go this far." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hesitation. Seeing Anna vulnerable, her defenses crumbling, caused a pang of emotion to rise within me. I had wanted her to suffer, to feel the weight of her betrayal, but now that it was happening, I felt conflicted. "What did you think would happen?" I pressed, my voice softer now. "That you could keep living this lie without consequences?" Anna's shoulders shook as she fought back tears. "I didn't want to hurt you, James. I was lost, and I made terrible choices." Michael shifted uncomfortably, his bravado slipping away. "I didn't mean for this to happen either," he said, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "It just happened." I felt my chest tighten at their words. As I looked into Anna's eyes, filled with remorse, I realized that exposing their betrayal wasn't giving me the satisfaction I thought it would. Instead, I felt hollow, as if the very act of revenge was draining me from the anger I had held onto for so long. As the conversation unfolded, I watched the weight of realization sink in. Anna's tears flowed freely now, and the sight struck a chord deep within me. Each sob felt like a dagger to my heart, unraveling the anger that had fueled my desire for revenge. Instead of feeling triumphant, I felt lost, adrift in a sea of emotions that I could no longer control. Michael remained silent, his face etched with a mixture of regret and disbelief. The power I thought I would feel at this moment was replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. Watching the two of them, my wife and her lover, reveal their vulnerability, I felt an unexpected wave of empathy wash over me. "You're both hurting," I said softly, my voice breaking the charged silence. "And I don't want to be the person who adds to that pain." Anna looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "James, I didn't expect this. I thought you'd be angry, that you'd want to punish us." "I was angry," I admitted, my throat tightening. "But seeing you like this, it just hurts too much. I loved you, Anna. I thought we had something special." Her gaze fell to the table, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. I glanced at Liam, who looked just as conflicted as I felt. We had both come here to confront and expose, but now that we were faced with the reality of our choices, the lines had blurred. "I don't want to destroy you," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to understand how we got here. How did it all go so wrong?" Anna wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her face contorting with pain and remorse. "I felt trapped," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I don't know how to explain it. I was seeking something I thought I had lost." Liam cleared his throat, his voice steady. "We all make mistakes, but we need to own up to them. This isn't just about you two, it's about us as well. We deserve better than to be treated like this." The emotional weight of the conversation settled in, and I realized that revenge wasn't going to heal the wounds we were all carrying. The pursuit of vengeance had been my way of coping, but now it felt hollow, a futile attempt to regain control over a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. "I don't want to carry this anger anymore," I confessed, my heart aching. "I want to move on, but I can't do that while holding on to this resentment. It's exhausting." Anna looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "James, I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I lost my way, but I want to find it again." As I gazed into her eyes, I realized that I was tired of being angry, tired of seeking vengeance that wouldn't bring me the closure I craved. Instead, I wanted to reclaim my life, to let go of the past and start anew. The restaurant, once a battleground, transformed into a space of raw emotion and unexpected honesty. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle into my bones. "I think it's time we all faced the truth and let go of this pain," I said, my voice steady. "We need to move on, even if it means starting over separately." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about healing, about finding a way to let go of the anger that had consumed me. As the tears continued to flow, I saw in Anna's eyes a flicker of understanding. We had all been hurt, but perhaps this confrontation was the catalyst we needed to find our way back to ourselves. At that moment, I knew I was ready to leave the past behind and step into the unknown, hoping that the future would have brighter days ahead. It was time to break free from the shackles of betrayal and embrace the possibility of starting anew. Unburdened by the weight of revenge, the days following the confrontation were a blur. I felt as though I was floating through life, each moment an echo of the past but devoid of the anger that had once consumed me. After that evening at the restaurant, I realized that dwelling on the betrayal would only anchor me to a life I no longer wanted. I needed to make a change, something drastic that would sever the ties to a past that had become too painful to bear. I started to pack my things. The task felt monumental, as if I was not just putting my belongings into boxes but also sorting through the remnants of a life I had built with Anna. Each item I touched brought back memories, some good, some excruciatingly painful. I picked up the framed photos of us, moments frozen in time, and for a moment, I hesitated. Could I truly let go of these memories? But then I realized that holding onto them only served to remind me of what I had lost. With each passing day, I felt lighter as I filled box after box. I sold furniture, gave away clothes, and even donated books that had once been dear to me. It felt cathartic to let go of the physical remnants of a life that had become a source of pain. I wanted to step into a new chapter, unencumbered by the past. As I packed, I began to consider where I wanted to go. A few friends had mentioned moving to Denver for work, raving about the mountains and the vibrant city life. I had never been one for spontaneous decisions, but something about the idea of starting fresh in a new city was called to me. Denver felt like a place full of potential, a city where I could reinvent myself. I booked a one-way flight and secured a small apartment in a cozy neighborhood known for its coffee shops and art galleries. The excitement of the move stirred something within me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. I began to dream about what my new life could look like, free from the shadows of betrayal and hurt. The day of my departure was bittersweet. I took one last look around my empty apartment, where memories lingered like ghosts. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past dissolve. It was time to move on, to embrace a future filled with possibilities. As the plane lifted off, I felt a surge of exhilaration. The view from my window was breathtaking, the sprawling city below, the patchwork of greens and browns, and the distant silhouette of the mountains. I was leaving behind not just a place, but a version of myself that no longer served me. Arriving in Denver was a revelation. The air was crisp, and the sky was a brilliant blue, an expansive canvas that felt welcoming and full of promise. I navigated my way to my new apartment, and as I unlocked the door, I was greeted by the scent of fresh paint and the warmth of sunlight streaming through the windows. It was a blank slate, and I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of making it my own. In the days that followed, I explored my new surroundings. I discovered charming cafes where I could sip coffee while writing in my journal. Trails that wound through the breathtaking landscapes of the Rockies, and local galleries that showcased the vibrant creativity of the community. I began to meet new people, neighbors who greeted me with warm smiles and friendly conversation, and coworkers who welcomed me into their fold. Each interaction reminded me that life was still full of beauty, even after the darkness I had endured. I found solace in the connections I made, and slowly, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I took up hiking, something I had always wanted to do but never had the chance. The mountains became my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe deeply and shed the remnants of my old life. I also enrolled in a local writing workshop, where I could explore my passion for storytelling. Sitting in a circle of fellow writers, sharing our stories and aspirations, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. It was liberating to express myself creatively, to write about my experiences and the emotions that had once felt too heavy to carry. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice a shift within myself. The pain of the past had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into a deeper understanding of who I was and what I wanted. I was learning to forgive, not just Anna and Michael, but myself as well. I had allowed myself to be consumed by anger, but now I could see that forgiveness was not about excusing their actions, it was about freeing myself from the shackles of resentment. With each passing day, I felt more and more like the person I was meant to be. The shadows of betrayal that once loomed large began to fade, replaced by the light of hope and renewal. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. One evening, as I stood on my balcony overlooking the city, I marveled at the beauty of the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey I had taken, for the lessons learned through heartache and loss. I had survived, and I was finally ready to thrive. At that moment, I made a promise to myself: I would never allow the actions of others to dictate my happiness again. I was writing a new story, one filled with resilience, growth, and the promise of a better tomorrow. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of purpose ignite within me. The future was unwritten, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms.